So take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I think I need to share my screen.
Yes. And there it is.
Yeah. We got to switch. And
there we go.
Thank you so much to Jonathan and Kim, who took me through this yesterday so that I could be ready to go. Well, thank you very much, Hank, and thank you to Kim and Jonathan and Dynamark for this opportunity to speak with your dealers and your prospective dealers. So just to follow up a little bit on what Hank said, I have been practicing law for over 35 years, and over two-thirds of that time has been devoted to the electronic security and fire and life safety industry. When I meet people, I like to say that I'm just like a central station. We do alarms 24/7, 365. And we always look out for your best interests. We do contracts, naturally, a lot of mergers and acquisitions, risk management, licensing, and corporate work. So and we also do defense, not our favorite part of the practice, but we do take care of that. Something I need to show you by my insurance company. And now we're going to get started. So the most fundamental way that you create value and manage your risk in your alarm company, whether you're an integrator or provide a variety of services, is your team. Running your kind of company, which is extremely high risk, requires team effort, and it requires an outside team and an inside team. You heard Hank talk a little bit about the inside team just a few moments ago. So who's on the outside team? Who's on the outside team? And we're going to talk about that outside team, and I'm going to weave that into a case that I handled recently. It is very real, and you will see how it plays out when you don't have the right team members on your side. So the fundamental question is, does your team, is it knowledgeable about your industry and your risk? Does your team know how to create value for you? So we're going to start with insurance broker, and you might think, well, what's that about? How do they create value for me? Well, they create value by knowing your industry and knowing what kind of coverage you need. I can't tell you how many new alarm companies or companies that have been in the industry for a long time don't have the proper coverage. You need to have errors and omissions coverage, or you will not be covered for monitoring and service and repair. Those services are not covered by your CGL policy. You'll see how that plays out in our story. Your accountant also needs to understand the risk that you are presented with every single day. And the basic model for the alarm industry is RMR, and not every accountant knows how to properly book that and book it for your advantage, both from a tax point of view and from a value point of view. The next one is your lawyer. You need a lawyer who is completely immersed in this industry and understands all of the regulations that apply to you and understands your risk and at the same time knows how to create value. And your cousin Jack might be a terrific guy, but if he doesn't understand the alarm industry, he cannot prepare or review your alarm contracts. And no, it doesn't count for him to go to Big Blue and download one of theirs or anybody else. He needs to understand the significance of each and every risk transfer provision in an alarm agreement, and there are many, as well as the scope of work that you provide. Your central station. They have your back 24/7, 365. They have your back more than your spouse does. And they don't get ticked off at you. So choose your central station wisely. You're going to see how that plays out. And finally, your inside team. That's you. And your staff, and if it's your family that's involved with it, that's great. They need to understand the industry. They need to understand what their role is and what is important. And your technicians, you're going to see how that plays out. They need to be properly trained. Constant. It's not, oh yeah, well we did that a few years ago. No, it is constant. So here's the background of the story, and then we're going to go through how all these team members come into play. So it was a $2.5 million water loss in California. It involved a movie editing studio, so a lot of fancy equipment. They were having trouble with their fire suppression system. It kept leaking. The fire department kept rolling. The customer got tired of paying the false alarm fees, so they called my alarm guy, and they said, please put us on test for 2 weeks. Now, if I was present with you physically, I would probably be hearing a lot of groaning right about now, because we all know that violates code. So my alarm guy didn't know that you can't put someone on test for an extended period of time, and he did not know about Firewatch. Why? Because he was new to fire alarm monitoring, and he didn't know any better. So what happens? Well, a fire system contractor is on site on a Friday. They're fixing the system. They're doing everything they can. They install a new coupling. They fire the system back up. They leave, and Saturday morning at about 2 a.m., that coupling blows. And water ran for 30 hours in this location. When the fire department finally arrived on the scene, there was 1.5 foot of water in the building. It's a total loss of all equipment. Yeah, total loss of all equipment. And I'm sure you're probably wondering, well, wait a minute, how did that happen? Well, first of all, the alarm company lacked the basic knowledge of fire systems or code. It was a great idea to try to expand their services, but they did it without doing any kind of investigation, and they certainly didn't familiarize themselves with code or attend a fire class, and there's lots of them online now. There's no excuse. So you want to expand your scope, you want to add a new product, terrific. Dynamark can help you, your manufacturers can help you, but you've got to train. And you've got to train and train and train, and then you have to train some more. It is an ongoing process. And he didn't know. So he didn't know what he didn't know, and he got a letter from the customer saying, put me on test for 2 weeks, and he sent it off to the central station. And now we have this loss. And what happened with the fire alarm contractor? Well, it was a brand new employee. He had started work on Monday, and on Friday he was alone on site making these repairs, and he installed the coupling backwards. And so when that system fired up to 150 psi, the coupling blew, and the water flowed and flowed and flowed. So both people, both the fire alarm contractor and the alarm company, didn't do the very basic, and that is training. That is training. But you're probably wondering, well, wait a minute, what about the central station? Well, the central station was clueless. It's the only polite thing that I can say, because they took the alarm company's letter and they updated the client's profile and put the system on test for 2 weeks, And when that signal came in on Saturday morning, they ignored the signal. And they did not dispatch the fire department. Shame on them. And I bet you're all feeling pretty good that you're with Dynamark right about now, because they are FM and UL listed, and they are a 5-diamond central station. So ask yourselves, for those of you who aren't with Dynamark at the moment, do you have a good central station? And I usually get a lot of hands raised when I'm speaking in person. And my answer is, wrong answer. You need a great central station, not a good one, a great one, because they, more than anyone else, will protect you. And remember that the best price isn't always the best deal. So you're thinking, well, okay, oh boy, that's quite a bit of mistakes here, but that's okay. This guy has insurance. Well, no, he didn't. No insurance. Why? Because he allowed it to lapse. Because he didn't have that inside team working with him. This was a family-owned business. I get it. But you need to calendar these things. You need to calendar your license renewals. You can't count on the state or the insurance company to send you these renewal notices. They're not obligated to. But this particular broker didn't have renewal reminders. Now, a broker, like your premier provider, Eldorado Insurance, they're going to have renewal reminders. Why? Because they understand the incredible risk that you are under and what a lapse in coverage would mean. So calendar these important dates electronically and in hard copy. Yeah, does that sound like dinosaur time? Well, you need to do it because you don't know if your electronics are going to go bad. That's what we do in my law firm. Calendaring is very important to us for a number of reasons. And we have it both electronically in 2 different systems, and we have it on hard copy both for my personal assistant and myself. So you think, well, okay, so he didn't have insurance. Oh, by the way, he didn't have errors and omissions insurance. So even if his policy hadn't lapsed, he didn't have the right coverage. Why? Because he was with a customer that he decided to go with who had a little insurance agency but wasn't intimately involved in the industry. So he went to him and he just thought he was, like a contractor, like a plumber, like an HVAC guy. Well, you're not. Your liability actually increases once you're off-site because of the type of services that you provide. So you're thinking, well, okay, no insurance, but he had a corporation. He had a corporation because we all know that that is another best practice for protecting what is most likely your largest asset, your business. But no corporation either. But he had one. He had one, but his accountant, who wasn't in the industry and didn't understand the risk management side of the corporation, told him to dissolve the corporation and go back to being a sole proprietorship. So when I finally got involved in the case, I'm sorry, but bankruptcy was an option. Well, it was no longer an option without a corporation. So we incorporate for 2 reasons. We incorporate for taxes. Yes. Usually you get a better deal tax-wise if you're a corporation or an entity. That is up to your accountant. But we incorporate for liability. We incorporate for that separateness between your personal assets and your corporate assets. And when you do have a corporation, please respect it. Respect it and maintain it properly. Because if you don't act like a duck and walk like a duck, the IRS doesn't need to treat you like a duck. And they would love to treat you like a sole proprietor because it's more in it for them. So no corporation, because the accountant, again, had no understanding of the risk side of this equation. And you think, well, okay. So no corporation, no insurance, but he had a contract. Come on, the guy had a contract, right? No contract. No contract. Why? Because of his inside team. He didn't have a good inside team. And they had monitored this location previously, and then the building and the business was sold. And they never followed up with the new owner to have them sign a new agreement, even though they were receiving checks in response to their invoices, and the name on the check didn't match the name on the account. Hello, red flag. So you need to follow up with your customers, at least annually. If you can do it every 6 months, I would be way happy. But do it at least annually. Follow up with your customers on who are the owners, who's on the call list. You want that call to go to the right person. So you need to include reminders. Maybe you include it on your statements. Even if you send them electronically, there is a way to include a message to update your contact list. Send separate letters. You have to have internal controls. And make sure that you have signed contracts with all your customers. I can't tell you how many deals I handle. And the seller tells me, oh, no, we're really good about that. We're really good about that. We have everybody signed. Typically, we find that anywhere from 10 to 15% of all contracts are not signed. People make mistakes. You get crazy, you get busy. If it's you that didn't sign, easy fix. Sit down and sign it. If your customer didn't sign, get out there. Get back out there in front of them and get them to sign that agreement. At least we'll be covered for monitoring on a going forward basis. And don't DIY your own agreements. There's some agreements that are out there. They're not all well written. And then you need to update your agreements every 2 or 3 years, two preferably, or whenever you add a new product or service. You need to stay on top of that. You need to be sure that your scope of work is covered by your agreement. What was his other mistake? Well, he had never been in fire before, so his contract didn't cover fire monitoring. It only covered bird. And by the time that I looked at it, it was so old. It's covered in cobwebs. You need to update your agreement. It's the best way to create your value, because that is what you're going to sell when you sell your company or you finance your company. And that is the best way to manage your risk. And attend your local alarm association meetings. Make the effort. What was this client's other mistake? Well, he didn't have insurance. He didn't know, he wasn't involved in his local association. He didn't know where to go to. So he went to a lawyer who was one of his customers, who was a family law lawyer. Again, not a lawyer in the industry. And so that family law lawyer started handling this $2.5 million case. Now, shame on that lawyer. Because in the same way that I started the presentation with the alarm company didn't know what it was doing and it should do what it knows, that lawyer made the mistake of taking on a representation that he wasn't qualified to take. So mistakes all the way around. And you see how each of his team members let him down. each of his team members let him down. Don't be that person. Build your value and your risk team now while it's all good, so that you're not scrambling when it isn't. And that concludes my presentation. Do we have any questions?
So, Lillian, first of all, that's excellent information. But I got to ask you, because I know everybody's wondering, how bad did it get for this dealer?
Well, thank you for that. That was one of my bigger successes. He only ended up paying $5,000 to completely resolve the case. And a lot of it was begging, a lot of it was maneuvering. And although I try very, very hard not to ever point fingers at another member of the industry, when I need to do so for a member of the industry, such as my alarm company client, I pointed that finger, and I pointed it at the central station. And we were in mediation for 18 hours. Yeah.
Wow.
We started at 10, and I think we left at 2:30 in the morning.
Oh, my God.
But, you know, my client first got the clue that his lawyer might not have everything together when he emailed him and said, where can I get a copy of NFPA 72? And where can I get a copy of NFPA 25 and 13? And finally, that's what gave him the clue that, I may not have the right person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it happened. It worked out okay. His legal fees with me were more than that, needless to say.
I bet he didn't have any problem paying those fees and was very, very thankful too.
He was very grateful, and you know, and it was kind of a sad. You know, he was getting ready to retire.
Yeah.
And that's why he was building up his RMR. So never let your guard down. No pun intended. This is too high a risk of industry. And you know, you might say, well, you know, yeah, but that's never going to happen to me. I've never been sued. I've been doing this for 25 years. Well, you know what? I've been in my house for 30 years. I've never had a fire, but I'm never going to go without insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
Always.
Why don't we open it up for questions? I know that we've got some people listening to you, and I believe probably already was worth attending this event. Does anybody have any questions out there?
I do, actually. This is Kim. I wanted to know, Lillian, what is the difference in liability between an LLC and a corporation?
Both provide liability protection, and both provide a shield for that liability. But there are different ways to collect against a limited liability company that aren't available to a corporation. But both provide a layer of protection.
Okay. Would you, if given the option, because LLCs, correct me if I'm wrong, Lillian, are a little bit easier to set up, at least in the state of Florida, I know they would be. Is it worth making the additional time and investment to get a corporation if you have a choice? Which one would you go?
Personally, I favor corporations. And in the industry, I favor S corporations. When you come out from the Secretary of State, you are immediately a corporation, and you are a C corporation. An S corporation is a tax election. You don't tell the Secretary of State that. You tell the IRS that you want to be treated as an S corporation.
Right.
The advantage to an LLC is that there is much less corporate maintenance that is required, and it allows for much more flexibility when you're having a variety of people come into the business, and each person is contributing something different. Some might contribute money, some might contribute know-how, some might be working the business. You're allowed that flexibility in an LLC and not so much in a corporation.
Got it. That's a good answer. All right, probably the biggest answer that's out there I'm going to ask, because I think people believe this, so it's probably a loaded question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. When would a dealer never require a written contract?
Never.
That would be never.
Somebody on the call wanted to answer it for you because they were like, "That's never going to happen."
Yeah.
I think there's some misnomer out there that if you're DIYing it, you don't need an agreement. Is that true?
That's crazy. No.
Okay.
No. Dispel that right now, because you need that protection. And if you're selling the equipment, and even if you're selling the equipment and having the homeowner or business install it, when something goes wrong, who do you think is going to come? They're going to come back at?
Install. Yeah, the company sold it.
Yeah, people in our culture, very, very hesitant to accept their own responsibility. So if you don't protect you, no one else is going to do that. So yeah, you need a contract at all times. Now I understand that sometimes we can't always have clients sign a standard form agreement, but then you need the appropriate counsel to help you navigate those waters.
Yeah, so that leads me to another question and guys, if I'm taking up space, just guys tell her you've got a question. At what point would an alarm dealer want to engage your services?
Well, all the time. I mean, right from the start, they need that team member. They need that relationship. They may not need anything at that particular moment in time, but when they do, they already know who to call. So they're not scrambling.
And I want to add to that point. The reason that we have engaged Lillian to join our Premier Provider Circle is exactly for that reason. We want to protect and help our dealers any way we can, and I cannot underestimate the importance of having someone on your side with legal expertise before anything happens. Thank God this gentleman, who she just described, was able to find Lillian and get what I consider to be the best in this industry on his side. But that's probably not the best time to be scrambling for help. Had he picked the wrong person, I got a feeling he could have lost everything. So with that said, if I was a sole owner / corporation, S corporation, and I was getting in business again, while I may not need Lillian for every service, I certainly would want to introduce myself, get to know her, and find out what she could help me with early on, because you're right. Had he used you early on, I assume, Lillian, he could have avoided a lot of missteps.
Well, yes, hopefully he would have had an updated contract that covered his entire scope of work. And we always check people's licenses as part of our due diligence in a new relationship. And one of the questions I always ask is, who you with for insurance?
Yep.
And many people, that's just right there and then. That's just a very critical and important piece of advice to get into the right hands. Now, Eldorado Insurance, Josh and Tony, they do nothing but the industry. So they're very, very familiar with your risk, as are a couple of other people as well.
Yep. Does anyone else on the call have any questions now that we've given you a little time to think? Anybody have anything they want to ask her? No. You've answered them all, Lillian. They're just stumped.
Well, all of them for this morning at least.
That's right. Just depends on where the morning is. For us out here, it's almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon East Coast.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So I want to just say once again, I would strongly encourage everyone on this call to make sure you gather her information, save it. Can you go to the last page, Kim? We can maybe go to that last page and show them again how to contact Lillian. The important thing I want to point out is if I were in your shoes as an alarm company owner, I would make the investment and then let her know that if you are one of our dealers who's actively working with us in some form, let her know you are part of the Dynamark partnership. She'll make sure she takes good care of you. I would have her analyze my business. I would spend the money to do that. It's worth the investment for your company to be safe and secure before it's too late. So there's her number. There's her email. That's a way to reach her. You can go on our website. You can find that information as well. Lillian, we can't thank you enough for joining us. We do appreciate you taking the time out and speaking to everyone on the call.
Oh, well, thank you so much for inviting me. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.